We have to reduce our carbon consumption. We have to reduce the amount of carbon that's emitted. So it was carbon focused, right? The climate movement was about energy. It was about joules of energy, trying to shave the peak.
Yeah, electrification is the big clean goal. I mean, when you really look at all of these policies on, Greta and everyone's talking about 100% renewables.
This idea of 100% renewables is an absolute possibility by 2050. Many countries around the world and even most of the states have committed to only using renewables or zero-emission sources for electricity. However, fossil fuel industries have exponentially risen during the last decade, globally producing a total of 35 billion metric tons of CO2 emissions in 2019. But global clean sources have been combating them equally. The consequences of these continued emissions can be devastating. Some regions in the world could become warmer, there could be more evaporation and precipitation, which would eventually warm oceans and melt glaciers. But what are our plans today?
We're going to invest $1.7 trillion in securing our future so that by 2050, the United States will be 100% clean energy economy.
Biden is fully focused on putting that money to work. When Biden was part of the Obama administration, he was the one that oversaw the stimulus package, which was there's the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which was a lot of funds. And so I managed two projects in 2008 to 2012 range where the government did a great job of putting a lot of money out into research and to really develop renewable energy. And I think he's going to do that same type of process.
With the election of Joe Biden, there is more hope for 100% renewables. Biden has specifically stated his immediate plans, but there are a few things he doesn't really explain, which are the details of actually pursuing these actions.
They want to remove fossil fuels completely from the system and then to really focus on solar energy, geothermal energy, alternative fuels, biogas, as well as food crops and everything else to really power the system and not have to, drill or use anything else to power the system.
Firstly, energy and electricity are not the same thing. Energy is what generates electricity. This is generated from fossil fuels, nuclear energy, and renewable energy sources. Getting rid of all fossil fuels from the system is a huge step. However, making all electricity generation from renewables only takes away about 25% of the global CO2 emissions. We still have to account for vehicles, agriculture, and industrial buildings. But what has been proposed is to simply electrify everything, with electric vehicles being first.
Electric vehicle infrastructure. So it's that whole concept of you can't really promote a market of telling people to get into these electric cars unless you tell them where you're going to charge your vehicle. It's like you can't really say you're going to sell all these gasoline cars if there's no certainty on being able to fill up the car. And people are particularly scared of running out of electricity for their vehicle.
A problem that we face is that we don't have enough support for these electric vehicles. We have all these advanced technologies readily available. It's just a matter of how can we put these infrastructures in place.
My whole concept and what we've been talking about is, there are a few corners where I go to where there are literally 4 gas stations on the corner. What if we could swap out one of those gas stations for a place to charge electric vehicles?
Having more locations for charging electric vehicles is a tremendous step in funneling more of those vehicles into our world. As more charging stations are opened, more electric vehicles will be used, but maintenance and consistently mapping out every charging location is a huge hassle. In the US alone, there are about 26,000 electric car charging stations, compared to the 170,000 gas stations, which is about a 3:20 ratio. This should be a priority. We should also take a look into industrialized buildings.
A lot of the time, but we spend a lot of time in buildings, and often they can be not very healthy for us, or they can be built in ways that are, don't support what we want to be doing. But some just quick statistics that I had pulled up before this were, homes and buildings in industrialized countries can represent 40% of energy consumption, 38% of greenhouse gas emissions, 12% of our drinking water consumption, and 40% of solid waste. So this built environment is really significant, and when we think about that, and how many new homes and new structures and new buildings we build each year, there's a real opportunity there for rethinking how we do that, and trying to lessen some of those numbers.
Every day, 13,000 residential and non-residential buildings are built globally, which is expected to continue to the year 2050. This does not account for industrial and commercial buildings, which are built at millions per year. Buildings produce a staggering total of 27% of CO2 emissions globally. This can be reduced with efficient strategies in the construction of buildings. But where does this energy consumption and emissions come from?
Because if you think about it, there's the energy you use while in a building, right? So the lights that you turn on, or the energy used for the heating system, and you can use efficient systems for that. But there's also all the energy that goes into producing the materials that you need for your building. There's all the energy that goes into the water, how you treat that water, how you use that water, how you treat it after you use it, right? So energy is threaded throughout that whole entire cycle. And so if we can think about those materials, change the kinds of materials we use, and change the systems we use to process waste, think about energy consumption, we can really have an impact on the generation of greenhouse gases, the use of materials, and that whole system.
A few examples like heating, lighting, and cooling all rely on fossil fuels and oils, which is why there is such a high emission of CO2 from buildings. A way to solve this is by switching their energy source to electricity, instead of it coming from fossil fuels and oils, because we have that technology to produce these materials, such as electric heating, and using renewable sources for lighting. And something that has been proposed is the Living Building Challenge.
We cover that all up with walls and ceilings, and you never have a connection. You don't know what's happening. But one of the goals of the Living Building Challenge is to make that more visible, so that things don't just, we think of, wastewater, what you flush down the toilet, it just goes away somewhere, right? Or things like that. But in the living building, the pipes are exposed and labeled. So it's gray water and, clean water from, the municipality, or, treated water. You see all that piping and where it goes. You see the electric conduit moving through the building. So you have this connection to understand, well, there's solar panels here, and then here comes the electricity. Here's where we use it. There's lots of control over the climate. So opening windows, opening shades, closing shades. So that connection, brings us much closer to understanding how these systems are working and how we interact with them, rather than it all being handled by some system we don't understand. And so you might think twice about, do I really need this light on when I know that it's using, and there's dashboards, right? This is how much energy is being used in the building today. And you can see all that, that's all visible. And it can change our relationship with how we use resources, electricity, water, all of that.
This control can be used to see what we are spending our energy on. It can give us an idea to lower our usage to be as efficient as possible. If these proposals are continued and used, we will have reduced a total of 66% of CO2 emissions, practically solving more than half of the global emissions, which is a tremendous improvement. The next step is ultimately in the hands of our generation.
Part of my hope is you all, and not just even being like corny about it, but what I see is with the amount of information, because again, like as a kid, I didn't have my first computer. Like my college application, I typed on a typewriter. I didn't have the first email account until I was a freshman at college. And so that amount of information, Google, I predate Google. I was in college before Google was around. And so that amount of information, I think, will provide you all the tools to solve a lot of stuff that we used to have to go to libraries to figure out.
Our generation has the mentality that a roof is not complete without a solar panel. Rising climate activists are everywhere, ready to protest and demand the change that is needed. With our electrification goals in mind, it is our turn to reverse the damages that have been made and look up to the year 2050.
I feel like in a way my life has been a tearing away piece by piece of things that I was taught and learned growing up that were lies. fake, false. And piece by piece, they've been being torn away. And as they are torn away, what comes in their place is, this isn't right. This needs to change. This can change. There's a t-shirt I have that says, another world is possible. And in a way, that's like a revolutionary idea to me.
It's a revolutionary idea for all of us.